Hi there, and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. I'm Brandis Friedman. On the show tonight,
we don't want to show up as the police in these situations and have a situation escalate.
Community reaction to Johnson's nearly $2 billion proposed police budget and what it entails. Why black women are more likely to die from breast cancer than white women. A look at the barriers to treatment and much more.
Gardening is the best form of therapy that insurance can't cover.
And a local police officer turns his backyard into an award-winning garden. Now to some of today's top stories. The U.S. House of Representatives finally has a speaker, 3 weeks after the historic ouster of former Speaker Kevin McCarthy.
We want our allies around the world to know that this body of lawmakers is reporting again to our duty stations. Let the enemies of freedom around the world hear us loud and clear. The People's House is back in business.
That's Louisiana Republican Mike Johnson, who's been a vocal supporter of former President Donald Trump and a key congressional figure in efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Johnson, who is the fourth member to seek the office in the last 3 weeks, received 220 votes with unanimous support from GOP members. Illinois Democrats have responded with criticism for Johnson for his efforts to oppose abortion and LGBTQ rights. On the agenda, passing legislation to fund the federal government beyond November 17th and providing billions of dollars in aid to Israel, Ukraine, and the U.S. border with Mexico. Loyola University students participated in a nationwide walkout across 100 universities, protesting the violence in Gaza and calling on their universities to divest from weapons manufacturers that sell to Israel.
Hey, hey! Ho, ho! The occupation's got to go!
The student groups argue that North American universities profit off the war through academic partnerships, vocational programs, and investment in arms manufacturers that Israel uses to strike Gaza. Students at other Chicago area schools participated today as well, including DePaul University. The U.S. Postal Service says efforts to protect letter carriers and prevent mail theft are paying off. USPS says more than 600 people have been charged with postal crimes since the launch of Operation Safe Delivery in May. The crackdown was in response to an increase in armed attacks against mail carriers and mail theft. Nationwide, nearly 500 letter carriers were robbed last year. The Postal Service says it's replaced so-called arrow keys with electronic locks in some cities and deployed more than 10,000 high-security blue boxes to prevent criminals from fishing the mail out of them. Up next, we break down the police department's proposed budget with community members right after this.
Chicago Tonight, Black Voices is made possible in part by Fifth Third Bank and by the support of these donors.
At Fifth Third, we believe when diverse voices are heard and empowered, communities are made stronger, lives are made better, and the future holds greater promise for all. That's why we're proud to support Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can drive change.
Mayor Brandon Johnson and the Chicago Police Department say they're moving into a new age of policing while rebuilding the department, but are calling for more money, patience, and time. The mayor's 2024 spending plan would increase the overall CPD budget to nearly $2 billion, accounting for more than 31% of the city's $5.7 billion corporate fund. That's by far the most of any city agency or department. Johnson says the budget will increase by $91 million to cover the cost of contractually required raises for employees. Joining us to discuss this budget and share their input are Oswaldo Gomez, Vice President of the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability. That's not him. Mark Clements, Senior Community Organizer with the Chicago Torture Justice Center and himself a survivor. Eric Wilkins, Survivors Alliance for Healing and Justice and Broken Wings Coordinator with Communities United. And Vajay Franklin, Youth Organizer with Good Kids Mad City. Just so we're clear, That's Vajay. That's Oswaldo. Thanks to you both for joining us. Thanks to you all for joining us. So as we mentioned, Chicago Police Department and the superintendent defended their budget proposal during a city council hearing just yesterday. Vajay, you spoke at the hearing. What were the points you wanted to get across?
My points I wanted to get
Yes,
across.
what did you want to convey to city council members?
I wanted to convey that why are we using 2% of this budget or increasing this budget to the police, and whether this can be used for other resources for black people. That's what I wanted to get across. Another thing was, like, I heard about the new budget for immigrants, and I'm not saying they don't deserve none of that. I'm just saying, like, there's been people, black and brown communities, that have been in worse conditions, the same conditions. The homeless rate's still the same, and nothing's changed. But when they came in, all of a sudden it's a $180 million budget deal. I think it should be used for better resources, my opinion. But yeah.
Oswaldo, you're part of the commission that helped shape CPD's new era, of course, by nominating Superintendent Snelling. Do you think this $2 billion budget plan is the right plan?
I think at the end of the day, it's the mayor and the department that put together the budget. My role is to give some clarity and make sure that people understand it in depth and make sure that we can give the community perspective in it. There has been changes that I think are positive. There's been more investment in victim services and other community policing things. All of those positions that have been largely expanded are civilian positions, meaning community members like everyone at the table could apply to do that job. We don't need officers to do those jobs anymore, and I think there's a positive step that way. There's also been an increase in the number of detective units and their supervisors. I think that's trying to address a little bit of that impunity that a lot of people in the city of Chicago are feeling, because there's a lot of crimes that go unsolved. And I think this budget is at least an attempt to address that. I will say that there's been a lot to be said about the increase. According to my office's estimation, the increase, depending on how you count it, falls below 5%, which is still below inflation. And I think the contractual obligations are still there, and we need to be considerate of that when we think about how the expansion occurred.
Mark, what priorities would you like to see the CPD budget set?
Well, first of all, giving the Chicago Police Department anything based off of the fact that since 1972 in the city of Chicago, we have not resolved wrongful convictions and police torture. We're paying out much as $100 million a year to deal with police officers that break the law, that commit criminal acts, that take even women to police stations and slam them up against walls, causing them to lose their children. Want me to tell you, I am not forgiving the Chicago Police Department one penny until once it has been firmly cleaned up.
Okay. Eric, same question to you. What's top of mind for you when it comes to this police budget?
I look at it as really like similar to what Mark was saying, you know, having a brother who was wrongfully incarcerated and then to have a consent decree that was that came behind the murder of Laquan McDonald in 2014, you know, and the money that's being taken away from the consent decree, you know, and the monitoring part, the 1.7 million, and just giving officers got to be held accountable, you know, and I feel as if, you know, the settlements that they paying out are way too many, and I don't think the prices that they giving people is enough, you know, and I think this should be a teaching mechanism for the officers, you know, to let them know that there some things ain't gonna be acceptable, you know. So we have to hold them accountable.
So it sounds like you want to see more accountability, as you said, from the police department. You did, Oswaldo, just refer to the $91 million increase. Johnson has said this is about workers getting their raises, and you said it's less than 5%. As we also mentioned, though, CPD's budget accounts for nearly a third of the city's discretionary fund. Are we spending too much money on policing? $2 billion, nearly $2 billion.
I won't speak on whether or not it's too much or too many. I think that every resident will probably have a different perspective on it. There are some residents that are feeling really impacted by public safety needs, and for them, the police might be the answer. And I know, because I've heard other residents that want other things that are not police. as alternative models for public safety. I think it's important to not have an either-or mindset, and it's important to know that as Chicagoans, we deserve public safety in a holistic way. I think we can agree that that's the path forward, and we can agree that a lot of other places do a better job than us. There are, I think, a lot of concerns in the budget, and in general, there's a lot of things that need to be fixed when it comes to public safety. I think the legal settlements are a huge concern to us because we know that that's just money that we're wasting on bad things that we are giving the police department money to pay for. It's allocated every year. It's 1.5 this year $1 million. It hurts, I think, community members to see that there's an allocation for police officers to do wrong things.
Which means there's the expectation that police officers are going to do wrong things. Vajay, let's talk about the Peace Book ordinance proposed by your group, Good Kids, Mad City. Part of that plan proposed taking 2% of CPD's budget to fund neighborhood peacekeepers and mediators. It's not included in this proposal, but his spending plan does propose expanding the city youth jobs program up to $28,000 jobs. Do you think that's a fair compromise for now? Do you trust that Peace Book might be included in a future budget?
Well, to be honest, I don't think that's enough. I don't think that's enough. You're giving over $1 billion to police officers, but you're not giving at least 30,000 teenagers jobs. I don't think people understand. The youth in this city, the youth is the last hope. If you don't give the proper resources or anything, this city is gonna get worse, and can't nobody be like, well, that's the kids' fault. They're not supposed to do that. I'm like, no, it's your fault. That's the mayor's fault. That's the government's fault. Because why are we only getting 2% of that money? And there's still impoverished, ridden communities. There's not enough resources. There ain't no mental health centers. There ain't no peace circles. What if a kid get roughed up by the police and then they sit in Division 6 or in the cell? What's gonna happen with them? You giving money to these officers, but these same officers are gonna go outside in these streets, rough their kids up and do anything they want, because I'm gonna be honest, police is a legal game. It's a legal game to me.
So you think, obviously, spending this much money on the police department, you'd rather see more money spent, at the very least, on jobs and Peace Book?
Yes, ma'am.
So Johnson has said that evidence of his new approach to public safety can be found outside the police budget, including a plan known as Treatment Not Trauma that would double the number of counselors working to respond to 911 calls to help people who are experiencing mental health crises.
This is actually something I've been pushing since I stepped into this role. We don't want to show up as the police in these situations and have a situation escalate where our officers are not necessarily trained, even though we do have CIT trained officers. But if we can get someone to handle that job who's a clinician, someone who has the background for it, it frees up our officers from that job. It gets that person the help that they actually need, and nobody's traumatized in this situation.
Mark, do you think this matches Johnson's campaign promises?
No, and it does not match the campaign promises. When we have many people that are still languishing behind prison walls and they are suffering. When we talk about trauma, think about people who have sat behind prison walls for 2-3 decades and returned back into this society. We need better programs. We need more money allocated to Black and brown communities. I think that really hiring a police superintendent who is stating that he wants to be aggressive towards residents. Well, we went through that era with John Burns. We're dealing with it with another police officer by the name of Kenneth Boudreaux, and many other ones like Raymond Cavara. And when we tell you, guess what? It has not stopped crime in our community. We need jobs and opportunities.
I want to give Eric the last word. We've got just a couple of seconds. Eric, do you think this investment could make a dent in Johnson's overall public safety approach?
No, I agree with Mark. You know, the $4 million, you know, we need $4 million to spend on the kids alone. I have 2 small children that are getting bigger. My oldest is 11, you know, and watching them grow up in the same community that I came up in and faced with the same challenges, it's like man, when we gonna change, you know?
So it sounds like you'd like to see something more, something different. We could talk about this a lot longer, but unfortunately, gentlemen, we have to close it out here. Oswaldo Gomez, Mark Clements, Eric Wilkins, and Vajay Franklin, thanks to the four of you for joining us.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Budget negotiations continue for the next several weeks with final approval set for November 15th. Up next, what's behind disparities for breast cancer patients? The death rate for breast cancer in the United States dropped 43% between 1989 and 2020, according to the American Cancer Society. Despite this hopeful news, breast cancer mortality rates still remain 40% higher for Black women than white women. Black women are also less likely to be diagnosed and less likely to receive treatment. Joining us now with more on this present-day disparities and how to address them are Dr. Lakshmi Emery, Chief Medical Officer with Aetna Better Health of Illinois. She herself is a breast cancer survivor. And Paris Thomas, Executive Director of Equal Hope. Thanks to you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Dr. Emery, let's start with you, please.
Sure.
As a breast cancer survivor yourself, give us a sense of why early detection is so important.
Early detection is just the most important thing in this whole story. So I was found at stage 1 because I had annual screenings, and I was found at the point where I didn't even have a mass. I just had calcifications on my mammogram. So I was able to have treatment that didn't include chemo. I had surgery, radiation, and I was able to take a medication for 5 years that helps to prevent recurrence. So I'm currently a 5-year survivor, thank goodness.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I think it's just really important that people are not hesitant about getting screening. It's important to make sure that you don't bury your head in the sand and are afraid of getting screenings. Make sure to get your screenings annually starting at age 40. And also make sure to go to your doctor if you feel anything, if you notice anything different, if you notice a mass, if you notice nipple discharge, if you notice skin changes on your breast. Get it checked out. Don't put your head in the sand. We need to make sure that we get treatment early because survival is so much greater if it's done early.
And I want to come back to screenings and that kind of stuff, something that you mentioned in a little bit. But Paris, why do these disparities between Black and white women exist at all?
Yeah, so here in Chicago, the disparity is actually greater than other cities. We have one of the greatest disparity really because of structural racism. When you look at the actual quality of care that Black women are receiving as far as breast cancer screening as well as treatment, it is not always quality. When you look at, we're set up, some states have systems that are controlled by 2 major hospitals or 2 major systems. We have a lot of medical systems here in Chicago, which means that they're not funneling the same resources. Specifically in low resource community hospitals, they're not getting the same resources as some of our huge accredited cancer programs and academic centers.
Tell us a little bit about the work that Equal Hope does to ensure that women are feeling supported.
Yeah, so Equal Hope is a community-based model. We're doing outreach, education, and patient navigation specifically to women of color in the west and south side of Chicago, ensuring that they have access to screening mammograms at no cost, ensuring they have assistance with nurse navigators all the way through treatment to be an advocate on behalf of them.
Dr. Emery, studies show that Black patients are taken less seriously when they report a health issue to their physician, are more likely to distrust their provider. Yes. How does that mistrust impact health outcomes? And as a physician, how do you overcome that?
Well, I think it's important that we have physicians and providers who are of the same ethnicity, the same culture. So I think we need to look at the pipeline of providers, going through medical school. We know that there are less medical students now than we've had in the past who are of color, and I think that needs to be addressed. So we need to look at programs, look at at certain scholarships and make sure that those are funded, so that we have more opportunities for people of color to become physicians and become providers. In addition, though, I think as a people, we need to look at that mistrust and think about where it comes from. You know, the Tuskegee experiment, there are lots of different examples throughout history, and, you know, there was well-founded distrust of the medical system, but times have changed, and we have, you know, people in positions of power now in the medical community. And if we're telling you, get your mammograms, get your screenings, you know, go ahead and do it. You know, you have to take that step and be an advocate for yourself. So I think it's really important that we just put some of that behind us and go ahead and trust the system, make sure that we know the statistics, know our bodies, know our baseline in terms of what our body normally feels like. And if there's something different, we need to get it checked out.
Get that looked at. We're looking at some video of mammography at work right now. Paris, what are some of the common myths that you have to dispel about mammograms?
Yeah, so some of the common myths include things such as that mammograms hurt. Yes, they're discomfortable, but they don't hurt when you get a mammogram. Other myths include just exposure to radiation. Some women believe that getting an annual mammogram is increasing their exposure, increasing their chances of breast cancer, which is not true. We've actually seen a very minimal margin as far as women who are getting annual screenings, and we know that it saves lives, so we know that it is crucial to the work that's being done.
Dr. Emery, you mentioned that, you know, starting at age 40 is when women need to start getting mammograms, but what about for women that might have a history and how that age recommendation changes?
Yes, great point. So that is different. So if you have a first-degree relative, so for instance, your mother, your sister who had breast cancer, then you need to get tested 10 years earlier than when their cancer occurred. So let's say, for instance, they had breast cancer at age 50, then you need to start getting your screenings at 40, and if they had it at 40, then you need to get it at 30. So it does depend. There are different risk factors that can contribute to a higher risk of breast cancer. So those recommendations of 40 are for average risk women. If you have a family history or other risk factors, you need to check with your provider or your physician to see when your screening should begin.
Paris, we've got about 30 seconds left, but how can we better address the barriers that keep Black women from getting the help they need?
Yeah, so we can address barriers by having community models. I think it's really important to have community-based community health workers and patient navigators in place, as well as education in the system. It's really critical that people look like the individuals being served, and that's one of the best ways that we can approach this problem.
Okay, Paris Thomas, Dr. Lakshmi Emery, thanks to you both for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having us.
Up next, we introduce you to a local police officer finding solace in his plant oasis. It's never too late to start a hobby. Chicago Tonight's Joanna Hernandez heads to Garfield Park to meet a police officer using his love of gardening as an outlet to recharge his mental health.
Back then, I couldn't even imagine this. None of this was here. Again, we have to go back. I have 4 planters. Yeah. I was just trying to keep those alive. And then upon keeping those alive, it kind of grew.
If you can see dirt, add another plant. It's one of Duranis Cooper's philosophies.
This looks like we're walking through a jungle here.
We had a situation because I have so many plants back here where I was unsuccessful in growing grass. These plants drain out so much, it was just killing my grass. So I decided to put pavers back here and make it a seeding area.
What started with 4 planters has grown into more than 50 plant species in Cooper's backyard.
When I was a kid, I used to help my grandmother in her garden. Her garden was basically a vegetable garden. And back then it was more of a chore as opposed to a love.
But over the years, Cooper's love for plants grew, literally. He calls it his grandma's garden in honor of her memory.
Deep in here is a wine barrel.
Stop. Oh my God, yeah, you can see it. Oh my God. So literally you can plant them in anything almost.
The Garfield Park resident says getting his hands in the dirt helps him cope with the challenges of being a police officer.
You can come home and shed your uniform, you can shed a duty belt, but you can't shed your brain. I can't put my brain on a shelf and come back and pick it up tomorrow. So all of the experiences that we've endured day in and day out, time and time again, it stays with us.
Officer Cooper has been on the force for 23 years and shares some haunting stories.
5 or 6 years ago, my teammates and I were sitting down for lunch one night in Hyde Park, and the call comes out over the radio that a child had been shot. So of course, naturally, we get up, we take off, we go to the scene, and unfortunately, an 11-year-old boy was playing with a gun that he and his cousin had found and was shot. And as we're trying to deal with that, within 15 minutes of being on that scene, another call comes out of a person shot.
Literally feels like you're being transported somewhere else.
Yes.
From 10-foot elephant ears to sweet potato vines, Cooper's vibrant oasis even got the attention of 2 furry felines.
Hi, Cheeto. And he spends a lot of time in the garden.
Yeah, he showed up a year ago in September. Smokey showed up back in April.
You give them that love and care?
Yes, you give them love, you talk to them, I look at them, and I mean, it's just kind of fun watching them do them.
What you see now will all be gone come winter.
Literally everything is gone.
Everything is gone. The planters have nothing in them, and we start fresh every year.
Start over.
I start fresh every year.
Wow, so you kind of love that.
That's
So every year it's kind of different, as you mentioned.
Every year, my aunt and I start our plant pilgrimage right before, right before Mother's Day, and that's how it gets started.
For Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, I'm Joanna Hernandez.
Pretty impressive. Cooper's Garden was selected as one of the best residential gardens by the Chicago Excellence in Gardening Awards. You can see why. And for those who want to get into gardening, his #1 tip is to read the labels that come with the plant. For all of us with brown thumbs. And that's our show tonight. Join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10 for Chicago Tonight Latino Voices. Members of Chicago's delegation to the southern border shared their takeaways from the trip and inequities in the effects of climate change on Lake County's Latino communities. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, I'm Brandis Friedman. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm dedicated to preserving the dignity and rights of all individuals.